Okay, well, can you hear me? I'm losing my voice, I think, too. Joining Joyce. First of all, my thanks to the organizers of this conference and the dignitaries, and of course the opportunity to present this paper today. In this talk, I will discuss how I personally became involved with the Banqiang site and what we have learned from our study of the skeletons from the excavations at this site in 1974 and 1975. Shortly after receiving my PhD from the University of Toronto in 1969, I began teaching at the University of Hawaii. I was 5 years old, no, as I tell my students. And when I began to teach at the university, I began to work with some very notable archaeologists who happen also to be at the University of Hawaii, most notably Bill Solheim, and two of his students, Don Bayard and Chester Gorman. In the summer of 1970, I spent some time at the Sariat Hospital in Bangkok examining the skeletons from one of the seasons of excavation at Non Nok Ta that were under the direction of Don Bayard and Thai archaeologists in 1965 and 66. Another site that you've heard often today, located in northeast Thailand. And of course, my second opportunity to study prehistoric skeletons from Thailand was my participation in the Thai Fine Arts Department, University of Pennsylvania excavations at Ban Cheng in 1974, which were, of course, under the direction of Chet Gorman and Pisit Cherawans. In addition to being asked to join these excavations in 1974, the skeletons from both seasons of excavation at this site were sent to me in Hawaii for analysis. And this is where these skeletons are currently stored. Many individuals have participated in the excavations in 1974 and 1975, and also many individuals, many of my students at the University of Hawaii have subsequently analyzed the human skeletons from this site. A report on the osteological analysis of these remains was completed in 1980. And it was probably the only report that was completed before Chester Gorman's very early death, just a few years later. And because of Chet Gorman's death, studies of these skeletons and the report that I had finished in 1980 were put on hold until I persuaded one of my former PhD students, Kel Douglas, to undertake a second, much more detailed study of the skeletons from Banqiang that she used for her dissertation research. She also used the skeletons from Non Nok Ta for her research. So this was a very important piece of research. And this research not only resulted in Kel Douglas's successful PhD, but also which he was awarded in 1996, but also, of course, the publication of our monograph, which I understand from today's announcement, you can ask the JFK Foundation, they'll send you a free copy, apparently. There are still copies available. And this publication, whoops, I did it again, oops, sorry, was published in 2002. I have to be careful about pushing buttons, I guess. Okay. Now, two separate sites, which were located 100 meters apart in the village of Banqiang, were excavated in 1974 and in 1975. The 1974 excavation, referred to as Banqiang, or BC is the abbreviation, was in the yard, as we've heard, of a private house that had minimal disturbance from looters. And the 1975 excavations at this site were the Banqiang Eastern Soi, this BCES excavation. And this was in the middle of a road. Altogether, approximately 142 skeletons, which were predominantly primary supine extended skeletons, were excavated during these two separate seasons of work at Banqiang. Grave goods associated with the burials included, of course, pottery, bone tools, clay pellets, beads, metal adzes, spear points, bracelets, and anklets. Additionally, skulls and limbs of pigs and or cows were placed with the human burials as mortuary offerings at this site. Banqiang is a mortuary and an occupation site with varied usage, including habitation and other occupation activities. The stratigraphic sequence of the burials at Banqiang are divided into 10 phases that had been grouped into 3 periods, early, middle, and late. They roughly fall within the date range of 2100 BC to 200 AD. The Banqiang burials were interred over the course of a few thousand years, a time period that happens to also cover the transition from hunting and gathering to agriculture in Southeast Asia. Although the prehistoric inhabitants of Banqiang had knowledge of domestication of plants and animals from the first settlement of the village, evidence from various sources, including the burials, indicates that the early inhabitants at this site were not intensive farmers. They relied, however, substantially on hunted game, fish, and wild fruits. The distinctive red and buff ceramics appear in the middle period, at which time water buffalo and iron implements, common accessories for intensified wet rice agriculture, also appear. Since its discovery, Banqiang site has figured very prominently in the investigations on the origins and the dissemination of rice agriculture and metallurgy in Southeast Asia. Collaborative research involving the Banqiang skeletons by myself and my students have resulted in the publication of 2 monographs, 10 journal articles, 5 book chapters. In addition, 2 doctoral dissertations at the University of Hawaii have focused on the skeletons from this site. Sean Halcrow at the University of Otago also used the subadult skeletons from Banqiang for her PhD dissertation. The predominant issues in archaeological research in Southeast Asia include the historical, the biological relationships of the inhabitants, the origins of intensified wet rice agriculture, and the origin of complex societies. In addition to these studies of health and lifestyle of the early inhabitants of the Korat Plateau region of northeast Thailand, that involved the systematic recording of thousands of measurements and non-metric observations, have also been the subject of more specialized studies, including paleopathology, isotope analysis, and most recently, our attempts to obtain ancient DNA from the bones and teeth of these skeletons. Now, many other researchers have also examined the skeletons from Banqiang that are stored at the University of Hawaii. A few of them are noted here. Very importantly, C. Loring Brace, Christy Turner, Matsumura, Hanehara, and Ishida. Student, Cal Douglas, of course, Sean Halcrow. Christopher King did isotope studies for his dissertation. Alex Bentley has also done other different types of isotope studies on these collections. And most recently, I'm collaborating with geneticists in Dublin and Harvard in the ancient DNA studies of the Banqiang collections. Now I'd like to discuss some of the important things that we have learned from studies of the skeletons from this site. First of all, I will discuss what we have learned about the health, diet, lifespan, and lifestyle of some of these earliest inhabitants of northeast Thailand. People who were in the transition from hunting and gathering to a lifestyle to one more increasingly relying on agriculture. Second, I want to share with you what we have learned about the biological relationships of ancient inhabitants of Bancheng and their relationship with the people in the surrounding regions of Southeast Asia and beyond. And lastly, I will mention one particular burial from these excavations, burial BC, burial number 23, which was given the nickname Vulcan by the excavators. And this is from the 1974 excavations in Bancheng. Skeletons represent the most direct evidence of the biology of past populations. And their study, today, the field that we refer to as bioarchaeology, provides insights into the health and well-being, the dietary history, the lifestyle activities, violence, trauma, ancestry, and paleodemography. These areas also help inform our understanding of the range of issues in bioarchaeology, such as the causes and the consequences of the adaptive shifts in the past, for example, foraging to farming, and the biological impact of invasion and colonization, differential access to food and other resources, conflict and warfare, just to give you a few of the issues and topics that are explored in this field that we now refer to as bioarchaeology. Bioarchaeologists, by the way, are not archaeologists. They're physical anthropologists who are trained in the study of human skeletal remains. But obviously, they need archaeological context in order to do this type of work. Now, a central concern in bioarchaeology is this interaction between biology and behavior, and very importantly, the role of the environment on health and lifestyle. Although physiological stress cannot be measured directly in skeletons, we have a variety of indicators that are observed and recorded in the skeleton and in teeth that are used to infer stress and its impact on the individual as well as the population. The model that most bioarchaeologists now use to study health in the past is one that was developed by Alan Goodman and Armelagos. Oops, I did it again. Yes, this model that's shown in the top of this slide. This model focuses on the causes and the skeletal manifestations of stress, thus allowing researchers to systematically examine stress and to reflect on the adaptive process and the central role of health in this process. General indicators of metabolic stress include mortality and fertility measures, adult stature, cribra orbitalia, and dental enamel hypoplasia. Linear enamel hypoplasia, which is shown here in this slide, forms during infancy and early childhood. It is a visible, has one or more bands of decreased enamel thickness on the crown surfaces of teeth. These defects are associated with acute forms of stress, including infection, inadequate nutrition, and weanling diarrhea. Cribra orbitalia, shown here in this slide, is commonly attributed to inadequate diet, usually iron deficiency anemia, parasitic infections, and other disorders. More specific indicators of health include dental pathologies, dental caries, dental abscessing, dental attrition, loss of teeth before death, antemortem tooth loss, and so on. Other specific indicators of metabolic stress in the population include osteoarthritis, which is the oldest human disease, infection, trauma, and trauma. Sorry. As has been shown elsewhere with the transition to and the intensification of agriculture, there are increases in these indicators such as fertility, dental caries, dental hypoplasias, quibroorbitallia, trauma, infectious diseases, and a decrease in mean age at death, dental attrition, and adult stature. In other words, human health declines after the adoption of farming or agriculture, and this is often accompanied, of course, with the rise of civilization. The agricultural sequence at Banqiang broadly spans the transition to agriculture and includes pre-metal burials, Bronze Age burials, and burials associated with the first appearance of water buffalo, the introduction of iron, and intensified agriculture. This region of the world also overlaps one of the known major homelands of agriculture in the world. Thus, the skeletons from Banqiang, which were divided into an earlier and later group, provide a glimpse of the human health and disease during this transition from hunting and gathering, cultivating towards intensified agriculture, and further allow us to see if Southeast Asia follows this global trend of a decline in health with sedentism and the intensification of agriculture. So with this as background, I now will very briefly examine the evidence for a number of indicators of health in the Banqiang remains. And once again, we're going to look at these indicators in an earlier group of burials and the later group of burials. And we're going to see if the transition to agriculture in this region of the world is indeed associated with a decline in health as seen elsewhere in the world. Some of the results that we obtained from studies of the skeletons from Banqiang are mixed. Our analysis showed a decrease in life expectancy. It showed decrease in mean age at death over time, both of which are expected with agriculture economies and furthermore are suggestive of a decline in health. And this is illustrated in this slide. We have earlier and late burials shown decrease in life expectancy at birth, life expectancy at 15 years of age, and the mean age at death, you can see also, shows a decline as well. Now, likewise, as expected, there were increases over time in this indicator, linear enamel hypoplasia. And an increase in quibroorbitallia, both of which are indicators of childhood health. And these are, in other words, are consistent with the expectation demonstrated by studies of agricultural intensification found elsewhere in the world. However, on the other hand, there is no evidence in the Banqiang skeletons for other changes that we would expect with intensified agriculture. The expected decline in adult stature was not observed in the Banqiang skeletons. Maybe I'm going too fast. I may finish this a lot sooner. Further, we did not find the expected increases in dental caries, dental cavities. nor were there significant increases in skeletal infection or traumatic injury in the Banqiang skeletons, which again would be expected with this transition to agriculture as demonstrated elsewhere by other bioarchaeologists around the world. There were no patterns of infectious diseases to suggest the presence of diseases such as tuberculosis, treponemal diseases, or other endemic infections in the Banqiang skeletal series. Also, there are no patterns of injury that suggest interpersonal violence or warfare in the Banqiang skeletons, looking at earlier and later skeletons. Some of the dental pathologies revealed increases over time: antemortem tooth loss, periapical cavity or abscesses, and dental calculus. However, dental caries, alveolar resorption, and attrition were found to decrease in the Banqiang comparisons of earlier and later skeletons. The frequencies of many of these dental variables at Banqiang fall in the range of pre-agricultural or mixed economy populations. So, overall, Southeast Asia does not appear to be one region, a region of the world that doesn't follow the general global decline in health with increased sedentism and or the adoption and intensification of agriculture. Contrary to general expectations, the evidence from Banqiang and other sites in northeast Thailand, for that matter, suggests that there was actually an improvement in health over time. The evidence from Banqiang also serves as a good example of regional variation in biological response to sedentism and intensified agriculture present in prehistoric Thailand. The reasons for this variation might include the reduced susceptibility to carious infections due to eating rice, and the late commitment to intensified wet rice agriculture and a continuous reliance on broadly based subsistence systems, even with the adoption of agriculture. Likewise, this evidence indicates that the transition from hunting and gathering and cultivating to intensified agriculture was a slow process. Our studies also demonstrated evidence, or some evidence, for spatial variation, noted especially among the BCES graves that may reflect genetic relationships among the burials. For example, the majority of the individuals with winging of the central incisors are from the BCS. This is an example of this rotation of the central incisors that was found in several individuals that might be indicative of a genetic relationship. The skeletal evidence further demonstrates that both males and females led strenuous lives at Banqiang, but there is also evidence for a division of labor between males and females. Most of the activity-induced indicators that we observed were found in male skeletons, suggesting their involvement in strenuous activities. The lack of significant differences in indicators of activity and stress in the Banqiang skeletons also correlates with a general lack of evidence for differential wealth among the graves at Banqiang. Analysis of stable isotopes in the Banqiang skeletons revealed that the prehistoric inhabitants of Banqiang had varied diets. They consisted primarily of C3 plants, C3 terrestrial animals, and freshwater fish, diets that were found to change through time. Gender differences in diet were also noted. Females were consuming a wider variety of protein foods than males, and isotope values for the later burials suggest that female diets relied more on open field carbohydrates and more fish and or carnivorous animals, while males from this same time period were consuming more domesticated animals and less wild game. Other isotope analysis studies indicated that men arrived as immigrants, marrying into the farming communities, suggesting a matrilocal system, a very different cultural pattern associated with a relatively more rapid introduction of agriculture into Central Europe, which was predominantly found to be patrilocal. So this is a very brief summary of some of the major findings that we were able to find using studies of the skeletons. And I will, again, I will summarize these at the end.